Hey guys, welcome to Chef Grace's Place. Today we have Deagon Williams from Culinary Business Strategy, and I'm so excited to have her on because I've been trying to make a kind of like a cost control video for since I started my channel, and I don't think I'm not technically like good at taking that and making that like an interesting video. So I feel like you're probably a good person to have that conversation with.
One of my favorite topics. I'm happy to have that conversation.
So because I think not just for the business people listening, which, definitely, listen up, but I always think of my own kitchen at home as a restaurant that's never going to make any money. So there's so many ways to not make it more profitable, but make it less expensive that I think the average person who's not running a restaurant could definitely take, tips from.
Right. Absolutely.
So before we get into all that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'd be happy to. I'm excited and grateful to be here. I'm really excited about this conversation because, I just feel like we have such complementary skill sets and interests and stuff like that. And I always love hearing, I love learning about people like you. So I'm excited and grateful to be here. Thank you. So I own this company called Culinary Business Strategy. And while I have the greatest job on the planet and I really, really love what I do, it's, the true honest backstory of it, like so many other people, is like I got here by accident, kind of. There are times that as I was building this business and moving forward, I realized that I was completely stumbling blind into it. And then in retrospect, I was like, of course, this is where you were going the whole time. Like I can look back and see it. So, my brief story is that I was a chef by trade for 20, 25 years. I was one of those odd people that knew that they wanted to be a chef from like what I wanted to do from the time I was in preschool. And I never wavered from that. I didn't go from like superhero to firefighter to chef. It was like, I always wanted to be a chef. And I did that. Like I started working in restaurants when I was in high school, and I kind of pulled a geographic and did my senior year in high school in France, as a foreign exchange student. But the truth of the matter is I was really looking for a cooking school. And I had the good graces to be able to find an opportunity to go to a cooking school in exchange for washing dishes and translating classes. So gratefully I was able to do both of those and spent 7 years in France getting classically trained. Then I came back to the States, found myself at the helm of a fine dining restaurant way before I'd ever imagined that I'd be qualified to. So at 24, there I was with a 27-person kitchen staff, a daily changing menu, 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, in an inn that booked out a year in advance, that needed both innovation and tradition. And I was 24 years old. Like I knew how to cook. I didn't know anything else. I had no idea about management or food cost or labor cost or leadership or any of that. I was like, I could cook. That's what you have to know how to do in a French kitchen when you're a girl. You learn how to cook really well, because there's nothing worse in a French kitchen than an American or a woman.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right? And so I had both.
Especially an American woman.
Especially an American woman, right? And this was like 30 years ago now. So I learned how to cook. And then when I found myself at the helm of a fine dining restaurant, and I had like the equivalent of a $15 million annual budget or annual revenue. And I was like, didn't know how to count past 10 unless I took my shoes and socks off, because I never paid attention to anything that had to do with math or leadership. I was coming of age. I had this idea of like, cook it and they will eat it, build it and they will come, like make great food and everything will be great. And that's just not true. It's great for a movie, but it's not true.
And also the skills are they're very different, and also when you're studying cooking, you have to learn a lot of things. Like, it's like there are two there you could double major basically if you're gonna learn the business.
Yeah, it's double major. And also, I mean, there's a lot of people like sweet and savory are different mindsets and skill sets, let alone managing a kitchen, operations, let alone, So I became a chef and I love cooking. I still love cooking to this day, but I started learning stuff on the side because I thought I was the only person that didn't have a clue how to run a kitchen and do leadership. And so I started learning stuff. And then I realized that all of my counterparts or contemporaries didn't know either. And so friends and friends of friends are like, hey, can you set up my food costs? Can you set up my labor costs? Can you help with this? And I'd be like, sure, I'll try. And then later I realized that I had developed a skill set. And I spent so much time watching people make amazing food, but struggle with the business side of it, that I love to help people's dreams come true. Like math is not that scary. It's like going to the, or maybe it's the dentist is worse, but it's not that scary. It feels really scary. And so I try and bring the business side to the food world so that chefs and entrepreneurs can do what they do. Most chefs and entrepreneurs didn't get into business to be like, yeah, I want to crunch numbers.
True. So you started a course that it sounds like you specifically thought about for people that have, made it this far through the pandemic, but need to reevaluate things. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I launched Culinary Business Strategy like 13 years ago now. You've been doing that exclusively. And I made every mistake in the planet, in building my own business. And so I can help clients like how to name a business. Don't name it something that has 3 S's in the middle of it, like mine, and stuff like that. And I do one-on-one consulting, but actually not everybody can afford a consultant, especially in this industry where margins are tight. So I built 2 online courses, my mega courses. And so the first one is called Food Financials, which is a 4-week intensive course. It has 2 90-minute, classroom sessions a week and several workbooks a week, and had videos and tutorials. It basically goes from soup to nuts about financials in the food business, like startup money, capital investment, financials terms and concepts, which, I was kind of a throwaway when I put in. And I have since learned that it's one of the most valuable ones that people really love, because the money side is really scary and intimidating. And I just break it down of like, this is what these fancy words mean in English or in relation to your world. So that's helpful. I mean, people really thrive on that one. And then we do like food costing, labor costing, building financial models that include like overhead, cost of goods sold, labor and profit. I think I may have lost you for a second. Oh, there you are. So, and then we go through financial projections and stuff like that as well. So it's intensive. It's tools that people get to keep forever and use over and over again is the whole point. But for the first, it's a 4-week course, and I stick with them for 5 weeks. So there's like one-on-one or group work all the time in my private Facebook group or on Zoom sessions. So we can work things out. Like I want people to not only just have these tools, but I want to be with them side by side so we can.
Do you also, a big one, do you touch on taxes too?
We do touch on taxes. I am not, I always say this really clearly, like I'm not an accountant or an attorney, but we certainly do talk about taxes. And I know enough about taxes to put people in the right direction. I'm just not filing somebody else's taxes, right? That is a licensed thing, but certainly I can help build the financials so that the taxes are not a surprise, because I mean, as you might know, like if you don't set that money away right away, it's ugly.
Yep. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you find people do, and then they just like, oh, this was so easy to fix?
Yeah, big mistakes that are easy to fix. That's a great question. Thank you. I never would have thought to ask it like that, but it's so true, right? There are these things I think in any arena, like this is huge and it's no big deal. one of them is just having a financial model to knowing what you expect. There's so many times that people go in and say, I'm going to try my best. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to try my best. And you can't expect anything more of me. And I'm like, that works in kindergarten, but now you're a business owner. Like, let's define your best. And I think so many people feel disempowered and don't know that they have more options than just to try their best. Right. And so having a model, which means that we know those goals, like where's your break even? What is your cost of goods? So like, what are we looking to achieve rather than just trying my best? Because that is fatiguing and almost impossible to succeed at. Like, I was just writing a blog post a few days ago about like, most people have one of two problems. They're too busy that they can't pay attention to their business, or they're not busy enough that they can't pay attention to their business. And having a financial model is not as hard as it sounds. It's easy to fix. And it means that we can move forward and not worry about it going forward. Same thing with cost of goods sold. People are so freaked out about food cost, as I was exactly how I got down this road. And in fact, I have a system where you can set up your cost of goods sold. It's labor intensive, data entry intensive in the beginning. And then you can know your food cost within like 5 to 10 minutes a week, month. And it's not that hard, but so many people are afraid of it. And I wish I could say, please stop, let me help.
I feel like cost of goods sold is one of those things that when, especially as like a young chef, you're trying to make, you're trying to be like super interesting and like, I want to use this ingredient and that ingredient. And you don't realize like you have to set, it's not like when you think of your menu, you have to think of it in terms of like a system of purchasing and a system of like not throwing things away and a system of being able to use those ingredients in different menu items and things. So this way you're not only, paying a huge price for a small quantity. There's so many things that go into just purchasing and like reduce, reuse, recycle, basically, that people think of it as individual dishes instead of a entire system.
Right.
That's what I found. I found that there was this restaurant that opened in the town I grew up in, and I really liked it. And they were always slow though. And I was talking to, it was like a husband and wife, and we started talking. They had this this halibut dish. It was so good. But I started talking to them, and they told, we're talking about cost of goods and stuff. They were buying the per fish was $24, and they were selling it for $27. And I was
right.
Like, you can't do that. Like, you're gonna go out of business. If this becomes this is such a good dish, but if this becomes your most popular dish, it's gonna put you out of business.
That's why a menu mix is so important, right? I mean, you can't sell halibut at $27 that cost you $24. Like, there's the contribution margin on that dish is $3, and you have to pay rent and all of your fixed costs on your contribution margin. One of the ones I also find is that I frequently hear people say, we're not making any money now, but when we get busier, I'll be able to buy in bulk, and my cost of goods, my raw ingredients will be less once we're busier. And I'm like, do we know that?
Yeah, it's like, can you even survive until you get busier too?
Right.
Like, so yeah, that's a hard one.
It always amazes me now, because I almost exclusively think of the business side. I mean, professionally, I think of the business side. And I want to say, like, how is it possible that like and I did the same thing. Again, this is why I got into this business, but like, how is it that we think we can be in business and not know the numbers?
Right. And I'm surprised. That's what kind of also it little irks me a bit about the the educational system. You go and you pay for these degrees in culinary or pastry or whatever, and then they only teach you the practical side. They don't really teach you the business side. I was lucky where I did get a pretty good grasp of accounting and stuff, but I was very interested in it. I was super nerd, and a lot of the people in my class, I could tell they weren't taking it. They didn't realize the significance of it while they were in the class, because they just wanted to go and learn knife cuts, and it was like, well, this seems it's boring, but it seems important. And then once I got the grasp of it kind of became more like less boring and more like a challenge. Like, ooh,
Yeah.
create this cool menu and then like bring the cost down. And this doesn't. All these systems also, it's not just for like one type of restaurant. So people in catering, or if you're just doing a special event, like all these tools are going to make you way more profitable. Or just, at least not break even,
Right.
Or show you the map to where you have to go to be profitable or to break even,
Yeah, and so often when stuff like this is taught, it's taught in like this isolated silo of here is how you cost out angel food cake. And we spend hours and hours and hours on this one cake. And I often find that students in like culinary schools or community colleges that teach really good, there can be community colleges that have incredible educations and then others that completely suck. It doesn't just have to be like the 3 or 4 major culinary arts schools in the country. But when we spend like 3 classroom sessions on an angel food cake, if somebody's not a total geek nerd into numbers, their eyes are going to roll in the back of their head and they're not going to stick around long enough to actually understand that this ties into a whole system, right? And people that teach, it seems to me that most people that teach stuff like food costing, it's like, please stop being so boring.
Yeah.
Like, please help people get involved. I mean, I was absolutely not a numbers person coming of age. I totally didn't pay attention to it in high school. I had nothing to do with it. And then all of a sudden, and now like I love numbers because I think it's kind of like watercolors, right? It becomes really interesting and like how we can move stuff around and make it work.
Yeah, I think I first got interested in the number stuff when it's actually a science teacher. I took forensics in high school and they were showing how like the FBI and all this other stuff, they actually would catch all these criminals and stuff from the accounting side and not by the like a catch me if you can type thing, and not the not what you would think, like, because then we would have to go like lift a fingerprint or something, and it was like the hardest thing to do. And like we're like, how does anything get done? And then we went into all the numbers and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Wow, I had no idea. That's a great way to go about it.
Yeah, so then it was like storytelling instead of math, which is more fun. Gossip, which is more fun.
Storytelling. Yes. Storytelling is so much more interesting than absolutely. It's amazing how we all come at, or how people get to the place with numbers that make it viable for them.
So what were some of your like mistakes that you figured out how to correct when you first got started with your business?
With this current business, the consulting business?
Yeah.
Or food businesses? Because
or just in general.
Yeah. What were the mistakes I made? There are so many. I often say that, like, I made all the mistakes, so let's work together. I can, you can have the benefit of my mistakes. But some of the mistakes that I made, especially when I was younger, I was really focused on, like, am I doing it right? Am I being perfect? Is it good enough? Whatever. And I didn't have, I think, the gift of kind of the perspective that I've gotten with age, and I don't think everybody has to have it with age, but it's just for me, that's how I got it, to step back at the big picture and be like, what is the market need? Even if I'm a chef and chefs are brought up to believe that like, if you make amazing food, they will come. What does the customer need? Let me always look at it from the customer's perspective. And I'm known to say, be so good that people can't help but buy your products. Be so good at what you do. And that there's a really big difference between like McDonald's is, like it or not, is really good at what it does, what it wants to do. And the nicest restaurant in the country is really good at what it wants to do, but those are two very different things. So it's really important to define the mission and the vision are the mistakes that I think I made. I would be like, I'm going to go work really hard and I'm going to do this. Does it fit somebody else's need? And
and you talk about needs, like between when you look at McDonald's and you look at like a fine dining restaurant, McDonald's really does exploit people's needs because they're creating super cheap, high calorie food, right? So if you're poor and you need something quick that's going to fill you up to take you to your next job, you're going to go with McDonald's. When you look at the fine dining thing, it's not necessarily a need, but it's a want. And it's also, in the, I was really surprised when I went into fine dining that most of the business wasn't like individual people, but it was like business lunches, corporations trying to show off and like, get in clients or, make deals, that kind of environment. So the needs were completely opposite of the spectrum there. But both of them have to, they have the same systems where it's, reduce your waste. Every dish has to, if I order the chicken in the fine dining restaurant, and then I come back a week later and I order it again, it's got to be consistent. It's got to taste the same, right? So, and same with McDonald's. And everywhere you go at a McDonald's, that Big Mac's going to taste the same. So there's so many elements that are the same, but they serve different wants and needs.
Right. And so thinking about it from the customer's perspective of like, what are those wants and needs? I mean, I think one of the, it's hard to say this because I don't believe in McDonald's, but like one of the things that McDonald's does really well is that Big Mac is exactly the same in Omaha, Nebraska as Turlock, California. And like you said, it's consistent. It has different flavor profiles in different countries, but in the States, it has really consistent profile. And so it allows for the customer and for the potential customer to have this thing, a sense of a personal relationship with that brand and that product. And I can be driving across the country. I remember the last time that I had this like nostalgic McDonald's moment was, I don't know, probably 15, 18 years ago when I drove across the country with my sister-in-law. And I was like, oh, and we're going to go to McDonald's. And she's like, you're going to be disappointed because it's not what you remember it to be. We went to McDonald's and it's not what I remember it to be. Like, but the idea of like, oh, that's the McDonald's from when I was way that we can project ourselves onto that image the same way that we can project ourselves into a fine dining restaurant. Like I'm somebody that eats there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And also, especially with McDonald's, nostalgia is a huge seller, just like it is with, Oreo cookies or, anything like that. Like that brand has been around for so long that, that's another key selling point.
I didn't grow up on Oreos, but I do have that kind of nostalgia.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Northern California. My parents named me Deagon. So like I grew up on a lot of like organic vegetables and brown rice.
Nice.
But because of that, so I didn't grow up on Oreos, but I see Oreos in the grocery store and I still have that emotional, nostalgic response to it. Like that's the power of a brand, right?
I
So I
mean,
always say that the tripod of success is the product, the brand, and the financials. So how does that halibut actually taste? But Oreos gives me nostalgia. And can we
yeah.
produce it at a price that sells?
And Oreos and peanut butter, you gotta try it. It's delicious.
Really? I had
Um,
no idea. What do? You put peanut butter on the Oreo?
you just, yeah, you like dip it like chips.
You did.
There's a, when I was a kid, when Lindsay Lohan was a kid, what was that movie where she had like a twin? The Parent Trap. And they ate Oreos and peanut butter. And I think every kid that saw the movie tried it, and it was the best. It's still like I would make to this day. I'll still make like a peanut butter based ice cream and put Oreos in it, or like that flavor combination is so good.
Yeah, that is. Where did you grow up?
New Jersey. So I knew quite a. I don't know what the origins of the name Deagon is, but I knew like maybe like 3 Deagans actually.
Are you serious?
Yeah, they're spelled differently, but a few different.
I think you might be the only person I've ever met that said that.
Yeah,
That's
I saw your
impressive.
name. I was like, oh, I haven't heard that name in a long time.
Wow. And you didn't hesitate. Most people are like, how do you say it? That's amazing. You grew up in New Jersey. I was thinking Canadian, to be honest with you, but
I get that a lot. I get like German or it's kind of, I think it's because when you travel a lot, then if you spend time in those areas, your accent kind of goes all over the place. I got
I get in New York a lot, and I've spent like 3 days of my life in New York, or maybe 8 days of my life in New York or something. And so I do think that your accent changes because I can be all over the map as well.
also you spent time in France
Where are
too.
you now? I did. I spent time in France, and I learned French actually at a very early age. We were there for a year when I was 6 to 7. And so because of that, I learned how to speak French at a very early age. So my accent in French I don't sound like a native speaker, though I'm fluent, but I don't necessarily sound American because I learned it so early. And people are always like, in my French accent, people are always like, are you Flemish? And I'm like, Flemish? Like, are you German? Like they can never quite put it together. So
Yeah, France.
what's the most exciting thing in your business at the moment for you?
Doing this right now. It's not
Yeah.
this isn't making any money right now, but I'm working on it. So
But you enjoy the podcast part of it?
yeah, I mean, I've gotten to talk to so many different people, and I'm gonna go back to flying in a little bit. So the plan is to the plan of getting the job back really. So let's backtrack. So my boyfriend is getting his aircraft mechanic license. So we kind of, in our partnership, we take turns. So I was kind of doing the supporting, and now he's going to get this license, and that'll be a pay increase. So he'll be doing the supporting, and then I'll get to focus on, my goals and dreams without having to worry about the roof over my head. That's the plan, but we'll see because the pandemic throws a lot of wrenches and a lot of things. But that's the plan. And so my plan is to go back to the skies, but use kind of like not use that job to have to be like, oh my God, I have to pick up this many flights so I can, pay the bills and all that, but be able to use that job to use the flight benefits and then continue to do like a podcast, but also, go see the food and everything like that and interview people in that way. So
that sounds so amazing and so good.
That's
Friends of mine bought a small hotel and restaurant on St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
nice.
And one of them, right? And they were like, his dreams. One worked for the airlines and the other one was a hairdresser. And one of them was like, we're moving there. We're buying that hotel. We're making that place beautiful. That's what we're doing. And his husband was like, we are stable people. What are you talking about? And so one of them still does, like, he's so senior in the airline industry that he does like 3 flights a month. And he keeps like his benefits and stuff. I mean, if you can, I understand the first couple of years are rough, but if you can get past that, right, you can keep the flight benefits and you can learn so much and go places and you can build something else if you want. So he actually owns a hotel and restaurant in the Caribbean, and he used to be the union organizer, and now he went back to being a flight attendant. So he went out of management back to being an employee, and he was like, because to be the union organizer, he had to be at DFW for like, all the time.
Yeah, all the time. That's a tough job. I'm very grateful to my other airline. It might come back, hopefully. And that was all international, but we wouldn't have had a chance in hell if our union contract was ratified 3 days before we all got furloughed. So
what happened?
So we all got furloughed. I was working for Norwegian Airlines. And then they went out of business for their long haul operation, which is what I was a part of. But then the same people that had started the airline decided they were going to start a new airline called North Atlantic Airways.
And they were going to hire you guys all back.
Well, they realized that this was going to piss a lot of people off, I think. I love to say it was out of good faith, but you can't deny the fact that would piss a lot of people off, and it would make it extremely hard for you to get the permits to fly into the United States. So they went to our union and they said, hey, we want to do this airline, and we're gonna hire all of the employees that got furloughed back. We're gonna offer them their jobs back. So
super smart, right?
Super smart. And it also gave the union kind of a good footing to negotiate better terms on our part. So hopefully that works out. They wanted to launch by Christmas, I think, to get the holiday rush. But I can't put all my eggs in that basket. So I'm going to go train for a different airline, and hopefully, maybe I'll get the call back, maybe I won't. But I like, a domestic airline, you're not really going to get to go, or, an American-based airline, I should say, unless you're super senior, you're not really going to get to go international just by working, So hopefully, the other airline will come back, but we'll see, Either way, I got something to do.
You have options, right? But it's also really interesting to hear. I haven't seen it. I've actually flown more recently than I have in a long time. I mean, obviously because of the pandemic, but also for like client projects in the last couple months have just gone crazy. Last 2 months have gone crazy for me. But I've heard that airlines, the price of travel is just going to go through the roof.
It already has. So before the pandemic, I was going to a wedding of my friend in New Jersey. And I think like round trip, we spent like $200 on the 2 tickets, and then had to cancel it. And then the wedding got postponed to this year. And then we had to buy new tickets, and it was $400. So you're just making me buy the same tickets over again, even though you gave me a credit, which is, crap. And all the other airlines were even more expensive, because I was like, well, maybe I could just find a different airline and not use those points or whatever. Yeah, so it was just like, and then I had to cancel that because now the training's going to be at the same time, unfortunately. But now I'm going to have all these points that are probably going to be worthless, So we'll see. Well,
That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's like, that's a lot of money for me right now.
Right. Because you've been basically furloughed for a year and a half or something like that, right?
Yeah, and then I had a lot of problems with unemployment, as did a lot of other people, not getting paid from it. They told me I also taught pastry on the side, so I was able to get my part-time job back for a couple months, and it wasn't working out. But the unemployment, they had hired me back, I guess, in October, on paperwork, but I didn't start working until November. So they said all the months, all of October, I was just, I was filing because I'm not getting paid. And they said, oh, we overpaid you because you were full-time working. And I'm like, no, I wasn't. No, I wasn't. So I had to appeal that, and I still, I had 3 phone call court dates, and I still haven't, I haven't gotten the decision yet in the mail. But it was just they don't pay you for.
Wow.
So even though I am in the right, they held all my money. That's 4 or 5 months of, I don't even know how many, it's more than that, of just no income at all. And then to make matters more complicated, after the furlough was over, we lost, during the furlough, we could keep our health insurance. So once the company decided to go out of business, we no longer had that. And then because I wasn't receiving income from unemployment because of this nonsense, I was too poor for Obamacare. But I didn't meet Medicaid requirements, and they were like, oh, call Medicaid. So I would call Medicaid. Medicaid's phone number would say, call Department of Children and Family Services. And then you call Department of Children and Family Services, and they would tell you to call Medicaid. So when everyone's accountable, no one's responsible. So it was just ridiculous. So there's so many people that are just like me, I'm sure, that are falling through the cracks, and they're even in a worse situation than I am. So it's just, oof.
I just wrote down that line, when everybody's accountable, nobody's responsible. It's so true, right? I remember getting trained in CPR, that when you have to give CPR, you don't just turn around and yell into the crowd. It's like, somebody call 911. You look somebody direct in the eye and you're like, you, red tank top, you call 911. You make eye contact and tell somebody, I'm counting on you, because it is so true. And here you are sitting, thank goodness that you have a roof over your head and that you have, a partnership to where you guys can figure out how to make it work. There's so many people that don't have the agency to figure out, I need to do something with this time, and then I can find a way to make it okay. And you fall through the cracks. I have a friend that had a part-time job. Her job went from full-time, making basically $150,000 a year, to making $25,000 a year. But it was either stay on and collect partial unemployment, or just not. And she stayed working, and then she got screwed with unemployment, and just couldn't get anything. And she would have made $60,000 to go on complete unemployment.
And that's another thing that I learned in my appeal process, even though I was correct about, because they weren't, I wasn't getting paid at all from where I was working, but in my conversation with the appeals officer or judge or whatever they're called, I was like, but this doesn't even make sense, because this is my part-time job.
I don't get like medical benefits offered to me or anything. Like I'm a part-time employee. And he said, well, in the state of Florida, if you make more than $275 a week, you're considered full-time in according to the unemployment system. And I was like, what? How is anyone going to live off of that? That's not a full-time job. Like I'm not even full-time according to my company. So I was just, oh my God, I was so mad.
The thing is that it doesn't make any sense, right? And you can be so mad, but there's also just this like, how does that even work? I was reading with an article yesterday because our governor is getting recalled in September because Gavin Newsom is getting recalled because of the way. And I was like, what exactly did he do wrong? Like, I don't quite understand why we're spending all this money to recall the governor who has 1 year left in his term. Like,
yeah, that's the other thing. Like, justice costs taxpayer money at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and what he did, he was responsible for unemployment in the state of California. Like unemployment gave out $11 million to convicts that were in federal prison because they found a loophole in the system, and they just like the state of California just was like, woo, writing unemployment checks, but then people like you weren't getting checks. You don't need unemployment in prison. Your meals are taken care of. The pandemic didn't impact a prisoner's ability to have a job or not have a job, is what I'm saying.
that's true.
And you just kind of go, but you are part-time at $270 a week. Okay. So strange.
Yeah.
I'm excited that you found something to do, and like you have this podcast and you're doing stuff during the pandemic, right?
Yeah, I'm like,
it's really easy just to sit and get depressed.
well, yeah. There was definitely some of that for sure. But I think I can't, like, I know I can't do that. Like, that's just not my personality. Like, I'm always doing something, and I think it's definitely like a coping mechanism too, to just kind of like keep yourself busy, like throw yourself into your work.
Totally true. My major personal hobby is riding bikes, cycling. And my riding partner and I we're training to do something called Chef Cycle, which is a 3-day, 300-mile bike ride in Oregon. A couple years earlier, but it was basically it's a fundraiser to combat early childhood hunger. It's a bunch of chefs that get together and ride bikes and raise money. And it's incredible. Like when you ride 300 miles in 3 days, it hurts. It's hard. There's no two ways about it. And you come out of it so high. And when you do it for a cause that means so much, it's an amazing experience. So we were training for that when the pandemic came and shutdown came. And she said, if we're going to go into a pandemic and like we're going to shut down everything for a while, we have to do something to come out better than we went into it. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to floss our teeth more, or like, what are we doing? And she was like, we're going to ride every day. And so almost every single day since March of 2020, we started riding our bikes for 90 minutes a day at lunch. And the difference in our cycling ability and skill set and strength is mind-blowing. And it didn't feel like it at the time, but like we just do it like last weekend we just rode from Oakland on the other side of San Francisco out to Marin, and like we rode like 95 miles in a day just to go have lunch.
That's awesome.
And it was, the thing that was crazy about it is that it was no big deal. It wasn't like, oh. And, in a year and a half ago, I'm like, you can't ride 95 miles to go have lunch. That is crazy.
I think the problem is after lunch, you're like, oh, do I want to ride back?
Yeah. The problem was after lunch.
But that's awesome.
What would be a great lead for you? Like, if I could produce anybody, like who would you want to talk to, or what would be helpful?
Honestly, I'm always looking for people, so I don't really
Are
have
you?
yeah, because I reach out to people a lot, but a lot of people are just like shy, I would say, or they're like not, maybe they're not interested in
Do you
talking.
want to talk to chefs? Do you want to talk to business owners?
I want to anyone that has to do with food, I don't think like I do like talking to chefs and stuff, but I don't want it to just be all chefs, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Anyone who's doing something like new or has a new product that's helping. One of the things I really want to start showcasing more is efforts in sustainability, because I
Mm.
don't think people understand the importance and the impact. I mean, they know, oh, like I feel like if you're thinking of the person that like isn't in the industry, right? And it's just getting their information from like documentaries on Netflix, right? It's just like, oh, go be a vegan or don't eat fish, don't eat this, don't eat that. And so to kind of showcase how just like in like cost of goods sold, right? And it's a system. It's not saying we're not using this at all, because everything is connected. So like if you only eat meat, that's a problem. If you only eat vegetables, that's a problem. If you're not looking at the world as a whole or your plate as a whole, then you're missing out on so much. There's a balance, and we have to kind of like come back to that. So anyone that focuses on sustainable systems and stuff, I would really like to talk to, because
Okay.
I don't know. You know what I mean? I know a little bit about it, but I don't know everything about it.
Have you ever heard of Food Funded?
No?
Food Funded is a very small but impactful conference that happens in San Francisco once a year. I can hook you up with the Food Funded folks and see who we can talk to there, because that's really about getting funding and working, like everybody that's doing something good with food is involved there. There's the folks at La Cocina, which is an incubator kitchen for predominantly immigrant women. They're definitely interested in sustainability and making things work and things that will, yeah.
That would be cool. I don't think I went there. I was thinking I went there. I went to some other place that in San Francisco a couple of years ago on my birthday, and it was like a completely sustainable restaurant. I'm trying to think of the name of it.
Are you talking about Greens, maybe?
I don't.
Greens is kind of famous for that.
Maybe they also did aquaponics too, which was interesting.
Hang on. What's the name of that place? Well, aquaponics is super interesting, isn't it? There's a name of a really fancy vegetarian restaurant that's Millennium.
It wasn't vegetarian.
It wasn't vegetarian. Okay.
No, I don't remember. Might not. I'll think of it later. I'll put the link in the description if I can remember it.
That'd be awesome. There's so many things that we could talk about, and I feel like we could go on forever, or for a long time at least. And I hope that we get to remain connected, because I feel like there's so much more that we could talk about.
Well, there's one thing I did want to touch on, which was,
Yes, ma'am.
do you have any good advice for, I feel like because you went to school in France, one of the core values of French cooking is don't throw anything out. Don't put your money in the garbage can. Figure out a way to use it.
Right.
So I was going to ask you, what are some of your favorite ways to reuse things that most people would consider garbage?
You're good with the questions. That's your like secret wonder power or something. Right? You're great with that. Okay, so it's funny that you say that because my mentor is this like big famous is a chef, and or a restaurateur actually. He wouldn't call himself a chef.
You can name drop if you want. It's okay.
And his son, when I first started working with him, like how do I say this? I'm like I'm the granddaughter and not the first generation because he's like in his 80s, right? And so when he had a restaurant, he had cooks and it had a huge impact on the area that I'm in the Bay Area. And then I came in much later because I'm like, 20, 30 years younger. And so I kind of got the benefit of acting like kind of like the granddaughter then the kids. And his son is actually my age. I mean, he would always talk about like, look, if you walk into this kitchen, it has to be a national holiday before you throw something out. Nothing gets thrown out. And I was like, I went to school in France. Get real. What are you talking about? And then I learned like we recycled everything in that kitchen. Nothing got thrown away. And one of the things that he taught me that I really love because it's super smart, like chefs are taught, like your stock pot is not your garbage can. Like you don't put rotting hot dogs in your stock pot. No, right? But when he peels carrots or peels onions or has any like vegetable scraps, he has a plastic bag in the freezer and he throws all of his vegetable scraps into that. And then all of that becomes the prep for his vegetable stock or for his stock later on. So he's not using whole carrots. He's using carrot peels. He's using onion peel. Like
That's exactly what I do, actually.
Is it?
Yeah. I have my bag in the freezer. I just made stock last week, actually. I have it's a small stock pot for like a professional kitchen, but like for my house, like in Florida, I'm in Florida right now, so all the stoves are electric. So it's like, all right, this fits the biggest ring. So it's like, maybe like a 12-quart pot or something like that. But that is so important.
It's so amazing. So there's that. And then there's also working with seasonality. There's that old saying of if it goes together, if it grows together, it goes together. There's so many things that we can use. French menu will say that you can't repeat tomatoes in course 1. They can't show up in course 3. And I think in the last 25 years, we can kind of throw that out now. That's not necessarily true. Right?
After you said, what goes together grows together.
Okay, what grows together goes together, but also in classical French menus, there's nothing that you can do. You're not supposed to repeat the same ingredient twice in a menu. And I think that that's no longer true. That's no longer absolutely necessary.
I actually never learned that.
Really?
Yeah. Huh.
I mean,
it makes sense though with the like the haute cuisine. However you say it.
Yeah, I mean the thing is too is that also I went to cooking school in 1986, 87, right? And so I was at the tail end of classical cuisine. Nouveau cuisine had been around for like 25 years, but at the same time it was still like, oh, it's so new. And it was like, no, it's got, so I do think that you can use the same ingredient twice. Like if you're using, I don't know, concassé of tomatoes, you can take the inside of the tomatoes and use it in your ragu or use it in a salad dressing or,
I would say that it wasn't that you couldn't use it twice, but you couldn't use it in the same way. That was more the idea,
Yeah, that's a good idea, right? That makes sense. I mean, don't be lazy is basically what it's saying. But I think that there's so much secondary product that we can get from a primary product. And that's what don't throw anything away. It's such a romantic notion that chefs can go to the farmer's market in the morning with their little basket and pick up vegetables and have a one-on-one moment with their farmer and go back to their kitchen and just make something beautiful for a very reasonable price. And it's like, that's not reality.
No, that's not reality at all.
It's a sweet moment. It's a sweet idea.
Well, one thing, as you are in that, I feel like, California, Northern California, they're usually ahead of everybody else when it comes to recycling and, climate change initiatives. If you know anyone that is doing, one of the things that it drives me, I'm like, I don't understand why don't we have this, especially in like residential areas. We have recycling. Why don't we have composting systems? I'm in a small apartment. I can't have a compost bin. I mean, not every apartment could have a compost bin on their porch. Like, we'd have problems with animals and stuff like that. But why, I really want to know, like, is anyone trying to make a like national compost program? That's something I'm looking into. So if you know anything or know.
It's interesting. You know what? There was somebody at UCSF that wanted me to teach a course on like a food sustainability system. I can reach out to those guys and think about it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Why isn't there a composting system for residential and commercial?
Yeah. Because at one point I saw like there was a program that would pick up your compost, but it was very expensive for the business. So nobody was going to participate in it, unless they, were deeply like moved by the cause, but it was way too expensive,
What's interesting to me is I was just in Texas a couple of weeks ago on a client project, and the idea of recycling, it was so amazing to me to see like plastic, onion skin, and a Coke can go in the same bin. I was like, what's happening? Because in California, like, we haven't done that in 25 years.
Oh yeah, in Florida, like some places they don't even recycle plastic, or they have the bins and then the program, it's like not in existence anymore. So they just you'll separate everything and then you watch everything go into the same garbage truck.
I think that's one of the big complaints about recycling, right? That in general is that like we recycle it and then it all goes into the same place. I know that in my residence, we have trucks that come by for the green bin. We have waste, like recycle compost bins.
Oh, okay.
So we have green bins, we have recycling, and we have garbage, right?
One of the things that I learned when I went to France, actually, that I didn't know, was that you have to take the ring off the water bottle because it's a different kind of plastic to actually recycle the water bottle. And there's just such a lack of education, I think, when it comes to things like that in America.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Wow. I'll think about that more and circle back if there's anything else, like use, what are other things that you could use to not throw something away or not have waste? And then who's in the sustainability or the...
And also pointing out that saves you a ton of money when you're doing that at home or in your business. Like there's ways to, recycling. It's not just good for the environment, but it's good for your pocket. Which,
yeah.
I'm sure each touch on that in your food courses. Which
yes, absolutely.
Will be in the description.
That's a great thing. One of the things that I learned in an apprenticeship after cooking school and in a pastry apprenticeship is that I was told that the eggshell is the wallet of the baker, because when you I would like crack shells as the apprentice. I would crack eggs and separate eggs like all day long. It felt like it's all I did. And I was taught that you have to run your thumb through each shell to get just a little bit extra of egg white out, because when you crack 200 eggs a day, you ended up getting this much egg whites, and then that saved, it was the wallet of the baker.
I actually never knew that. But I had to crack so many eggs. I became ambidextrous.
I'm so jealous. That's awesome.
Like just
can you?
Yeah.
That's great.
We used to have
I am so glad to hear that.
We would race each other for really bragging rights, but to the fastest egg cracker.
That's great. Awesome. Where did you do that?
I literally did it in every job, but I used to race one of the girls I worked with at Barclay Prime for fun.
because like, we were on like opposite days, so we used to like write our time down, and it was fun. Because we'd have to we would make ice cream bases, and we would make creme brulee and different custards, and you just needed sometimes there were separate times. There were times for eggs that were like separated, and then like whole egg times, because when you do the whole egg, it's really you can do it 2 at a time, but obviously if you have to separate the whites and the yolk, then the fastest way we found actually was you put a glove on, which it's more sanitary, but it's also it helps insulate your hand from the cold of the egg, and you just crack it and let it drop through, and that was the easiest way to crack them. And you would give it a second, because if the yolk broke, you had like a second to like throw it away from the white.
Yeah, not getting into.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
It was always fun.
Yeah, I mean, you have to come up with something, right?
Yeah. I actually did a video on how to crack an egg, and the only comment on it was, "Is she high?"
Right?
I was like, pretty much. Pretty much high on life,
That's awesome.
Thinking about videos to make.
I love it that you made one on eggs, though. That's awesome. Good for you. I'm going to spend some time thinking about who I can find to introduce you to, because there's a broad stroke of what you're interested in, and there are folks out there that are doing interesting stuff in that arena. So,
well, thank you.
And then
so
we have
much.
a couple of other things to follow up with, but I hope we stay in touch. Please feel free to come join. Did you join my private Facebook group, Food Biz Builder?
I liked something, but I don't know if I joined something. I'll have to go check.
Okay, so I have a private Facebook group with food and beverage business owners on Facebook called Food Biz Builder, BIZ, Food Biz Builder, and yeah.
All right.
And I have a couple of smaller things like a cash flow toolkit, the 6-step process to how to manage an extraordinary food business is something that I'm happy to share with anybody that's interested. Those are like the gifts that I like to leave behind and say here, and then of course, if anybody's interested in talking about food financials, I'd be happy to jump into any kind of direct message and talk it out.
Yep, and all the links, we'll put them in the description. So if you want to join the group or take a course, you'll have access to that.
That would be amazing. Okay. Thank you so much. It was lovely to spend this time with you.
Thanks for coming on.
Okay. Take care.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening to Chef Grace's Place. I'll see you next time on the podcast.